All right, looks like we are live. Let me pull up Insta because Insta is always convoluted. I haven't figured out why it is, but I know it is. All right, there we go. All right, I'm live in every place that I need to be. Okay, I'm going to say this at the start of the video, but I'm going to say it again at the end because I want to give people a chance to come on. But I have to ask you guys, what kind of videos do you want to see from me? And the reason I'm asking is because I have got to get my channel views up. So I've been doing this for a while, but my channel views aren't anywhere like where I need them to be. So do I need to advertise more? Do I need to change my content? What kind of videos do you want to see? Do I need to change my broadcast time? It's coming on at 10 o'clock in the morning on Friday. Is that a bad time for most people? Is there a better time? What would be a better broadcast time? Do you prefer short form versus long form videos? Because I know some people have live streams that stretch into like the multiple hours and all that. And I try to keep mine short. I used to try to keep them under an hour, but now with questions, we normally go around 90 minutes on this live stream broadcast. So I need you in the comments. I need you to answer all those questions for me. What kind of content do you want to see from me? Would it be better if I changed my broadcast time? Do you prefer short form videos versus long form videos? Because I have got to get my channel views up. I've been doing this for a while, but my channel views are nowhere near where they need to be. So we need to get those channel views up where they need to be. Okay. So I'm going to repeat this message at the end of the broadcast for all those that aren't on yet. For those that watch me live and those that are watching the replay, you're going to hear this again at the end. But I just wanted to throw that out because, again, for me to keep doing this, I have got to get my channel views up to where they need to be, and I need to know what my audience wants from that. I know it's a saturated market. I know that there are plenty of channels that talk about pop culture. I tend to focus mainly on superhero media because I know how some channels review everything. I don't review everything because I don't have time to review everything. So I mainly focus on superhero media, but also that becomes broader. I also do sci-fi and fantasy content as well because I talk about Star Trek and Star Wars as well. But again, so I need to know what kind of content do you want to see from me? Do you prefer short form videos versus long term videos? Is my broadcast time 10 o'clock a.m. on Friday? Is that a bad time for most people? Do we need a better broadcast time? So I'm going to ask all this again at the end when I'm done, but I definitely need you to answer me and let me know. Because for me to continue to do this, I have to get my channel views up. So I need my audience to let me know what you want from me, what time you want to see it, that kind of thing. Super, super important. Super, super important. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is, and also if you're here in the comments, if you're here in the chat, give me a shout out. Let me know that you're here so I can see your comments in the chat. What we're going to talk about today is why did Butt Kick Man underperform? Y'all know I refuse to call it Superman because there is no super in that man. Okay. And this movie is still one of the worst pieces of garbage content I've ever seen in my days. Okay. And I've been reading comics since I was 4 years old. This is still some of the biggest trash I've ever seen. So what we're going to talk about today is why did Butt Kick Man underperform? Because I put it in my Twitter reminders. I put CINO. You know what a CINO is? A CINO is a character in name only. They're not that character, but they're that character in name only. They named them after a character, but they're not that character. That's a CINO. Okay? That's what that hashtag was in my reminder tweets this morning. Just FYI. Okay. So we finally got clear confirmation of what we already knew. We already knew that Butt Kick Man underperformed. Now, by underperforming, we simply mean didn't do as well as expected. Didn't do as well as expected. That's all underperforming means. Okay. So $600 million gross isn't necessarily a bad result, but you have to compare that to production costs combined with marketing costs. That's how you figure out if you actually turned a profit. So we're going to look at that in a few minutes. Production costs plus marketing costs versus the gross. Okay. So $600 million as a gross figure is nothing to sneeze at. But, if that's what it costs you to make the movie, you did not actually turn a profit. You didn't actually make any money. Okay. Now, on the personal tip, I knew that this movie was in trouble as soon as I saw that they were doing promo with Dairy Queen. Dairy Queen, not McDonald's, not Burger King, although Burger King did release some Superman toys, but only in Mexico. They weren't released here. They weren't released in the United States. So as soon as I saw that the promo was going through Dairy Queen, I was like, So let's pull that up and look at that right quick. All right. Dairy Queen launches Superman movie menu promotion. As soon as I saw that, I was like, really? Seriously? Dairy Queen? That's who we're going with? So Dairy Queen, a leader in fan favorite food and frozen treats, really is proud to announce the launch of a limited time Superman themed menu created in partnership with the upcoming Superman movie release. So you couldn't get McDonald's, you couldn't get Burger King in the US, you couldn't get Wendy's, just DQ. Okay. So it just makes me laugh. A meal fit for a superhero, grab an $8 cheeseburger meal deal served with full-size fries, soft drink, and a sundae. Only $2 more, upgrade your Sunday to a small Blizzard treat. Try the new Superman cake batter cookie dough Blizzard or pick your favorite from the summer Blizzard menu. Dairy Queen? Really, y'all? Dairy Queen? So as soon as I saw that, I was like, nope. If the bigger franchises actually believed in your film, then they would have wanted to partner with you. Why would they not partner with you? Why would they not want a chance to produce a custom menu and some toys for this kind of a franchise if they thought this movie had a real chance? So as soon as I saw this, I was like, yeah, nope, this movie's in trouble. Okay. So, and again, the toys that Burger King did were only released in Mexico. They weren't released here. So let's look at some estimated numbers because I want to look at some real numbers before we get into anything else. Okay. So when I say it underperformed, once again, I'm not pulling that out of thin air. So I actually pulled up more than one article, okay, because Ted Sarandos very recently dropped a little nugget of information where he said movies that underperform get a shorter theatrical release window, and movies that perform well get a little bit more time in the theater. Now, right off the top of my head, I'm like, well, duh. And then, duh, why would you pull a movie out of the theater if it's doing well? Just let that hit. So, as with everything else, they put unbelievable amounts of spin on this. But if a movie's doing well, why in the world would you pull a good performer from the theaters and put it on streaming? And by the way, we've talked about streaming before, but I just want to reiterate some points about streaming. If you don't understand why streaming is such a mess, it's because when you get hooked on something, anything, normally what hooks you is short-term gain. Normally what hooks you is the feeling you have in the moment. And if that feeling in the moment is strong enough, then it blinds you to long-term impact. So I want you to think about any addiction of any kind. And I want you to think about normally the hook is the short-term pleasure, the short-term high, the short-term gain that you get. But that very pleasure is what blinds you to the longer term impact of what you're doing. How is that relevant to our discussion? Studios got hooked on streaming because they got hooked on regular monthly subscription income. So I want you to think about what it's like before streaming. Before streaming, they'd have to work for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to a year, and even longer with movies like the Mission Impossible franchise. They'd have to pour in hundreds of millions of dollars. Then they would be done with production at one date. Then they have to do a marketing push. Then they have to hope that the movie hits and hope that they can at least make their money back, but they didn't want to make a living. They want to make a killing because what's the point of spending all that money if you just get that same money back? If you spend $300 million, which is nothing to sneeze at, you don't want 300 million back. You know, you want 600 million. You want, even though that's still a break-even point, but anyway, you want 900 million. You want a billion. You want more money than you put in, obviously, because what's the point? There's no point if you're just going to get your same investment money back. Now, on top of that, I want you to understand what happened with the Avengers, what happened with the MCU. Now, the Avengers was not the first superhero content to break $1 billion. The first movie that did that, by all accounts, is The Dark Knight in 2008. Okay, the second movie in the Chris Nolan trilogy with Bale and Heath Ledger's, historic performance as that version of the Joker. That movie broke $1 billion. But the movie that made Hollywood stand up and pay attention to perhaps the untapped potential was Avengers. It's when Avengers broke $1 billion. And when the MCU became wildly successful, that's when all of a sudden the expectations for superhero movies went up to the $1 billion box office. That's what did it. Because before that, if you think about it, we'll just go back, late 90s, early 2000s, we'll just go back to the Blade movies. We'll just go back to the X-Men movies. Okay? And yeah, we got to put Meteor Man and other stuff like that in there. But my point in bringing that up is, and of course, the Spider-Man, first Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man, 2002. Of course, back in those days, I want you to remember that no one was expecting those movies to actually do $1 billion box office. Think back to, 23, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. No one was expecting those films to do $1 billion box office. Nobody. And what changed that, like I said, was Avengers. Avengers is what changed that. And so now once you have that expectation, so you combine their addiction to monthly subscription income. Because again, before the theater model is you have to work for the better part of a year and then market and release and hope you make a profit. With monthly subscription models, all of a sudden you got money coming in every month. They got hooked on that. And that's why all of a sudden there was such a big push for streaming. But they didn't think about how streaming and the pandemic was going to kill movie theater sales. They didn't think about how no longer writing good content for broader audiences was going to kill it. There's a lot of things they didn't factor in because they got hooked on that monthly subscription income. Okay. So having said all that, let's look at this article. Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos has given new insight into Superman's digital release rollout. The 2025 superhero film was the first major release in James Gunn and Peter Safran's new DCU at DC Studios. The movie came amid a crowded year for superhero films and amid mutterings of superhero fatigue, placing Superman in a precarious position at the box office. Okay? So then it compares it to Man of Steel. But let's get into Sarandos's statements and his exact quote. The reason has since been revealed by Sarandos during a Senate hearing via C-SPAN regarding Netflix's potential acquisition of Warner Brothers. So he's being questioned because this is going to functionally be a kind of a monopoly, even though they're going to swear up and down that it isn't. So they can't just make this purchase without examination. When questioned whether Netflix would adhere to the industry standard 45-day window, Sarandos said that the window moves a little bit for movies that underperform. The Netflix chief then used Sinners and Superman as examples of these adjusted release windows, citing the former as a film that stayed in theaters longer and suggesting Superman was one that underperformed due to a shorter window. Ted Sarandos, 45 days is the industry standard for self-enforcement. However, routinely, movies that underperform, the window moves a little bit. Superman was a little shorter window. Sinners was a little longer window. Now, first of all, he's being questioned by Cory Booker about, are you going to keep the standard window for theatrical releases? Because everyone knows that Netflix doesn't care anything about standard movie releases. They want everybody getting a subscription for what I told you about before. So they don't really care anything about, excuse me, standard movie release windows. That's why they were being questioned about that. And he said out of his own mouth that the windows are adjustable based on the movie's performance. Now, I can't tell you the number of tweets that I have seen this week watching people spin that statement, because I have discovered that if somebody says the sky is blue and the grass is green, somebody gonna get on Twitter and say, no, 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 no. The sky is green and the grass is blue. You misunderstood them. Count on that. Write it down. It's gonna happen. If you're in the chat, give me a shout out. Let me know if you're watching me live. And put your questions up there too, because you know I hit your questions at the end. Someone is going to get on Twitter and say, you misinterpreted what they said. You misunderstood what they said. And they're going to put this ridiculous spin on it. And I mean, you can count on that. You can count on it. You can count on somebody's going to say, if somebody said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, somebody's going to get on Twitter and say, no, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You got it all wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You misunderstood them. Blah, de, blah, de, blah, de, skip and blah. Okay. Popcorn farts, I see you. Good to see you. Okay. So, I mean, right there out of his own mouth. Fans were initially surprised to see Superman arrive on digital so shortly after its cinema release. At the time, director James Gunn seemed to suggest the reason was Peacemaker Season 2. Peacemaker Season 2's August release. Gunn told Screen Rant the reason was very complicated, but that he wanted everyone to be able to see Superman, even if they couldn't get to a theater before Peacemaker, which is really funny because Peacemaker Season 2 didn't have anything to do with Superman. But lest you think I am making that up, we're going to look at comicbookmovie.com. Same thing. Superman was released in theaters on July 11th last year, and despite sluggish returns overseas, and we're going to talk about that, it was still the biggest superhero movie of 2025. The James Gunn helmed blockbuster was closing in on $600 million dollars when the DC Studios co CEO announced on August 12th that Superman would arrive on digital platforms 3 days later. Projections of a 650 million final global haul plummeted, and the DCU movie finished its run with $616 million worldwide. We're going to look at that. See, so same thing. Peacemaker Season 2 premiered on August 21st with an opening episode that had little to nothing to do with Superman. So once again, the keying in on the fact of what Ted Sarandos said about that window being moved because the movie Underperform didn't do what it was supposed to do, didn't do as well as they needed it to do out of his own mouth. Okay? No, it wasn't the only movie because Fantastic Four came out last year, as well as one more. I forgot. There's another one that came out last year too. Thunderbolts. So no, it wasn't the only movie of 2025. Okay, so lest you think I'm just pulling stuff out of thin air, now we're on Movie Wed because I've been told that, cite your source and blah, 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 and that was no good. So I'm giving you 4 sources today. But you can see the spin in the first line. Although Superman was undeniably a hit with critics and audiences alike, it wrong. So the sheer amount of spin never ceases to amaze me because nothing could be further from the truth that Butt Kick Man was liked by critics and audiences alike. Okay? It sounds like it was not the box office earner that some may have assumed it was. Now, we're going to talk about some more mitigating factors with that. But I just once again want to show you the same quote that Sarandos mentioned about why Superman's theatrical run was cut short. It was because it underperformed. So yes, we got a sequel coming up, but I'm talking about the original now, okay? And here we are again on Cosmic Book News, same thing. Exact same thing. So I've given you 4 articles now, okay? Netflix CEO confirms James Gunn Superman underperformed. So the reason I'm giving you multiple articles on that is because I want to demonstrate how many different ways is there to take that? How many different ways is there to take someone saying movies that do well get a little bit longer window in the theaters, and movies that underperform get their window shortened? How can you spin that? How many different ways is there to interpret that? Okay. So Booker, I want to ask a direct question. Will this be a fully exclusive 45-day theatrical window? Sarandos, fully exclusive to theaters, yes. Because again, everybody knows Netflix don't care nothing about movie theaters. But when asked if this window is strictly enforced, Sarandos gave a telling response and name-dropped James Gunn's Superman. It is the industry standard for self-enforcement. However, routinely, so this is not a one-off, and this is not an exception. Routinely, movies that underperform that window, the window moves a little bit. And Superman was a little shorter window and Sinners a little longer window. But they could still refer to it as a 45-day window. Okay? So they're saying, as we first told you, Gunn Superman failed to live up to expectations. And I told you where those expectations came from. Because superhero fatigue was going on, because the studios had got addicted to streaming, because the billion-dollar benchmark was now expected unfairly, I think, but that's just kind of the way it is, and because of Superman. Now, I would not argue that Superman is the most popular superhero in the world. He's among the top 3. Top three are Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. And I think that crown kind of switches depending on where we are, but he's still in the top three. Top three most recognized and popular superheroes in the world. Give me a shout out. If you're here watching me live, give me a shout out in the chat. Leave me some comments in the chat because you know I answer your questions at the end. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at some actual numbers because I want you to look at the numbers because we're going to address the idea as to whether or not Superman, Butt Kick Man, was actually profitable. Okay. So now we're on the Hollywood Reporter. Last year, documents filed by the Superman production team with the Ohio government seeking incentives listed the gross budget of the highly anticipated July film as $363.8 million. So you got to file to get the tax breaks. You got to file because they give tax breaks differently in different states and in different countries. They'll give you a tax break if you shoot in their state or shoot in their country. And do you know why they do that? Because whenever a movie production comes into a town or comes into a country, it increases the revenue and the traffic for the local businesses. So if you know a big movie is shooting in your town, people are going to come down, people line up to watch, people are going to eat at the restaurants near the location, that kind of thing. Okay? So anytime a big name production, a major motion picture is shooting in your town, it's going to increase the revenue flow to the surrounding local stores and maybe even a larger area. So they give the studios tax breaks to give them to incentivize them to shoot in their town or their country. Okay. So when that $363.8 million number was reported, Gunn said, "How in the world do they think they know what our budget is?" He wrote on social media. In recent days, DC suggested that the budget is a net $225 million after incentives and tax breaks. Yet one longtime financier says the $363 million figure isn't incorrect. And sources say DC and its parent could spend as much as $200 million on the global marketing campaign compared with the usual $150 million for an all-audience summer tentpole. It wouldn't be a surprise since Superman kicks off the gun era, and needs to work at the box office. Either way, between the production budget and marketing, it's certain to land in the $400 million club. The $400 million club. You understand what that means? What that means is that to make its money back, it needs to at least double that. It needs to at least double that. Let's skip on over to the Variety article. The film cost $225 million and another $125 million to market globally, the latter including pricey stunts like a Superman figure hovering at the apex of London's tallest building. Do you remember that? The Shard on July 1st. One rival studio executive estimated that the Shard Gambit alone cost seven figures. Wow. Warner's always believed that Superman would under-index internationally because the titular hero is inextricably linked with the American way. We're going to talk about that in a minute. What jumps out to me here is the salaries. Typically, a film stars earn the top salaries, but in this case, Gunn was by far the highest earner, pulling down 20 times more than David Cornsweet and Rachel Brosnahan, who each earned $750,000. They didn't pay the leads $1 million each, $750,000. Now you want to compare and contrast that to Tom Cruise, Scarlett Johansson, Will Smith, and Denzel Washington. They routinely command 10 to 20 million. And then Robert Downey Jr., to have him continue to be Iron Man, they gave him a multi-picture deal for like 50 million. and they might have given him 50 million by himself to come back for Avengers Doomsday. Just to give you a frame of reference of the kind of money that top earning actors earn. Cornsweet and Brosnahan didn't even break a mill to star in this film. Gunn earned $15 million. He also draws a seven-figure salary as the studio's top executive. And Nicholas Hoult, who plays archvillain Lex Luthor, nabbed a $2 million payday. Wow. Wow, what a slap in the face. Brosnahan had a little bit more established fan base because she had a successful TV series. Cornsweet had been in some movies because he was like in Twisters too, but he was by no means a household name. Either way, they couldn't even bargain or negotiate for $1 million payday. And Gunn pulled in $15 million, and Holt, who had a bigger name, you probably remember Holt the most from the X-Men movies. At least he got a $2 million payday. Back when this article was written, they were talking about their fast-tracking a Wonder Woman movie, but so what? How long have they been saying that? And they say they're thrilled with the Matt Reeves just submitted screenplay draft for the sequel to the Batman. How long have they said that? So that's just a bunch of jibber-jabber, if you ask me. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at Box Office Mojo. First, we're going to take a look at Man of Steel's numbers. What did Man of Steel do? Because people are forever comparing. I am not a Snyder bro. I am not a gun bro. I sure ain't a gun bro. I'm just me. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in worshiping directors. You can like what you like. I'm not telling you what to do. Y'all know I don't tell people what to do. I tell you what I'm going to do. Okay. I don't believe in that trying to pit one director against another, trying to pit their what. I don't believe in that. I judge the movies based on whether I like them or not. Because I also don't like every single film from every one of my favorite directors. Okay, I judge a movie on its own merits. But let's look at Man of Steel. Okay. Man of Steel's total worldwide gross was 670 million and some change. Domestic was 291 million. Interesting, it didn't even make 300 million here. 379 and some change worldwide on a budget of 225 million. Okay. Let's look at those same numbers for Superman 2025, Butt Kick Man. Okay. So it did more than Man of Steel domestically, 354 million and some change. But it did less than Man of Steel internationally, 262 million and some change for a worldwide total of 616 million. Okay. So it doesn't have budget figures here, but so those are the kind of numbers we're looking at and talking about. Okay. So if they had a $300 to $400 million budget, that means that to make the money back, we're talking about 600 million to 800 million. Because as everybody knows, ticket sales are split 50-50 between movie theaters and movie studios. So for every dollar you spend to go see a movie, half goes to the theater and the theater chain you saw it in, and half goes to the studio that produced the film. So if Superman is in the $300 to $400 million thing, then it did not turn a profit. If it's $300 million, then it barely turned a profit, a modest profit of around 80 million. If it's in 400 million for production and marketing, then it lost money. Either way, it underperformed, and either way, it didn't get close to the $1 billion mark that was expected, but it didn't even break 700 million, and it possibly didn't make its money back. So we're looking at numbers, we're looking at articles, we're looking at that whole thing. So you understand what's really going on here. Okay. So all of that is the what. All of that, what we just talked about, is the what. What I'm going to talk about now is the why. And that's the title of today's live stream. Why did Butt Kick Man underperform? Why? Okay. So there are multiple reasons. So I'm going to get into them now. Reason number one, the characterization was all wrong. I told you this is a Sino. This is Superman in name only. The characterization was all wrong. We see him being interviewed with Lois and he's losing his temper. He's losing his cool. That is the antithesis of Superman. Not that he hasn't lost his temper in both comics and animation, because I know people are going to flood with, comic panels and whatever. But Superman makes a concerted effort. If you understand the character, Superman makes a concerted effort not to lose his temper, because so many bad things can happen if he flies off the handle like that. Okay. Also, in that interview, he's defending flying into a country, talking about, well, I did it because we have to save lives. And he's going all off on Lois and, people were going to die. I don't care. In this movie, he's only been Superman for 3 years, but you're also a grown man and you're a reporter. So you can't possibly be so naive as to misunderstand that you just can't fly into other countries and do what you want. Some countries might even consider that an act of war, or at least a hostile act. You can't just fly into other countries and do what you want. Y'all know that. Superman, of all people, should know that. Do you understand that? But if you want to look at where that was done well, if you want to look at content where Superman is a global character, I'm going to give you 2 books to read. First book I'm going to give you is one of my favorite stories of all time, and that is Superman Peace on Earth by Alex Ross and Paul Dini. This is an oversized one-shot. I highly recommend you. If you've never read this book, this is one of the definitive Superman books. Good to see Iraq. I see you in the chat. I'm going to hit everybody's comments when I'm done. Thanks for watching me live. So this is one of the definitive books on Superman, though. It shows him dealing with different situations in other countries. And in one country, he's dealing with a dictator. And it was an Asian country. He's trying to bring food, and the dictator stopped him at the borders. And then they fired on the people, and Superman blocked the bullets. But he realized he couldn't take it any further, because he realized, he couldn't impose his values or American values. He couldn't do what he wanted in the face of against all those other countries' wishes. And also remember, in this movie, they had Hawk Girl kill a dignitary. Yeah. Don't get me started on that. But anyway, read Superman Peace on Earth. Okay. And the other book I would recommend, I just finished this book, by the way, is Superman the World. Now, let me hasten to say, I didn't like absolutely every story in here. And some of those stories, the premise was bad and the art was awful. I'm like, how did this make it in a professional book? But anyway, the point of this book, and they're doing one with Supergirl soon, because of course they are, because she's a spinoff character that copies everything Superman does. How many times do I have to say that? But anyway, Superman the World is about him experiencing things in different countries. And some of that has to do with his powers failing in certain situations. And so it's very, very interesting to see Superman deal with different languages, different ethnicities, different cultural expectations around the world. So I highly recommend both of those 2 books if you want to consume some content where Superman actually deals with being a global figure, and he deals with it like a grown man would. He deals with it like Superman would. He deals with it with wisdom, not flying off the handle. Okay. Next reason that Butt Kick Man underperformed? Was that the presentation was all wrong? The presentation was all wrong. The presentation was all wrong. Okay. What do I mean by that? I mean, what's the first image we have of Superman in that film? What's the first image we have of, wait a minute, did you see the books? Oh man, I don't think I put the books up there. There we go. There's Superman the world. I'm sorry about that. Uh, I pulled it up, but I didn't know that it wasn't on the screen, so I forgot to change my screen. So sorry about that. So there is Superman the world. That's the book I recommend. And here is Superman Peace on Earth. Okay. So sorry about that. I should have made sure that the visuals were there. Okay. All right. So next up, what's the first image we have of Superman in this movie? He's broken in the stone. Presentation was all wrong. First image we see of him is broken with his butt kicked in the snow. Okay. Like that's how we want to see Superman. Like that's how, that's our image of him. Like the first thing you want to see is him broken and beaten, bloodied and defeated. That presentation is all wrong. That's not how you want to see Superman. And my personal favorite abomination, in this movie was when Superman was screaming under the light, just right here. When Superman was screaming when his robots, oh, that picture's too small. When Superman was screaming and his robots were holding him down because he was trying to get a sunlight bath to try to repair his injuries. And he screams, and I can't tell you the number of people that attacked me about that on Twitter. And oh, he needed to, it was because his bones were being snapped in place and his organs were speed healing and blah, 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 blah. Superman doesn't scream under sunlight. When has that happened in any other iteration of Superman? Now, I know All-Star Superman, he got overpowered, but when does that happen? Where we see Superman screaming under the very sunlight that powers him. I want you to show me where else that has happened in any content. See, the presentation was all wrong. That's why I call him Butt Kick Man, because that's what he was, because this is so stupid and offensive. The entire presentation was wrong. It was wrong. We're wrong, wrong, wrong. Okay. Next up on why Butt Kick Man failed was this right here. The backstory with the L's was all wrong. Now, you remember if you saw the movie that they completely changed the backstory of Superman in terms of Jor-El and Lara in this film. So in this film, what they did was they said that Superman was being sent to Earth to actually create another Krypton, which, if you remember, was Zod's purpose in Man of Steel, to restore their planet and restore their culture. But here, the whole idea was that Superman was supposed to create recreate Krypton, and that he was supposed to do it having as many babies as he could. He was supposed to do it by taking a harem and reproducing with as many Earth women as he could. You remember that? That completely changes the backstory of Superman. That backstory is all wrong. Okay? So that makes them, having sent their son to Earth, to be a conqueror. Now, the idea that Superman was sent to Earth to be a savior actually kind of kicks in with the Donner film. When you read the comics going far back, the reason Jor-El put his son in the rocket ship was to save his life. I wasn't able to find a comic mention where Superman was sent to Earth by Jor-El to be an inspiration to the people or to be a savior to the people. I wasn't really able to find that in the comics. Now, if you know of a comic where Jor-El expressly states that, please send it to me. But every comic reference that I read showed that Jor-El sent Superman to Earth basically just to save Kal-El's life. The idea of Superman being sent to Earth to inspire and save people, humans, is kind of a retcon of the Donner film, if you never knew that. So like I said, if you know of any panels in the comics, or if you know anything that precedes the Donner films that shows Jor-El talking about sending his son to Earth to save the Earth and save the people and inspire them, please send it to me. But everything that I saw was, hey, what's up, Tony? Good to see you. Everything that I saw was about just saving Kal-El's life. But here, they say he's there to take over. He's there to repopulate the Earth. He's there to become a tyrant and a dictator and a ruler and have a harem and have as many babies as possible. Okay? I like that comment, popcorn farts. I'm going to pull that up when I get to talking. Okay? So this whole, see, that changes everything. And they could have easily gotten rid of this by saying that Lex Luthor messed with the translation and made it say that, but that's not really what they said, but they didn't. And Gunn made a point of saying, remember, he said no way he was going to change this. He's laughing at people that thought this was out of character for the House of El. Okay? So the backstory with the L's was all wrong. Now, next reason, we said this from the beginning. Okay? We said this from the beginning. There are just far too many characters in this film. I mean, there are just far too many characters in this film. There's no other way for me to say it. There are far too many characters in this film, period, dot, full stop. Okay, Superman the movie had Superman, the Kents, Lois, Jimmy, Perry, Lex, brief appearance by Lana Lang, Otis, and Miss Teschmacher. Buttkick Man had Superman, the Kents, Lois, Jimmy, Perry, Lex, Otis, Miss Teschmacher, the Engineer, Ultraman, Metamorpho, Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, Hawk Girl, Superman Robots, Supergirl, and some more after that. Some more after that. Okay? There are far too many characters in this film, and it ended up being just another Guardians film. And we know that. It ends up being just another Guardians film because it was far too many characters for them to get screen time. And then Superman ended up being sidelined and minimized in his own film. That doesn't make any sense. Okay? Which is the next point. First point I wanted to make is just another Guardians film with too many characters crammed in. But the next point was what I just said. Superman is constantly showing up in his own film. He's shown up by Guy Gardner. But who shows up Superman the most? Mr. Terrific. Now, I must say, as I like Mr. Terrific, that I'm finally glad that he got his due. Because I do feel like that the CW version of Mr. Terrific didn't really give him his due as a character, didn't really showcase who he really was or what he could do. So the good thing about this interpretation is that I do think that they did Mr. Terrific well in this movie. However, he's the alpha male in the film. He's the only one that's not whining. He's the only one that's not complaining. He's the only one that has a plan. Okay? But Superman being shown up in his own film is ridiculous. He's supposed to be the main hero. He's the hero that inspires others, but not in this film. Okay? Reminds me of Smallville, and don't get me started on Smallville. You do not want to hear me rant on Smallville. Okay? So, just on Mr. Terrific's competence alone. Now, I want you to think back in the first Superman Reeve movie, Superman the movie, Jor-El trained Kal-El. Do you remember that? Jor-El was talking to Kal-El when he was still a baby on his way from Krypton. Do you remember those scenes? That he was talking to Superman about different ideologies and philosophies. He was teaching Superman physics while he was growing up in the ship from Krypton to Earth. Because Superman wasn't a baby, he was a little boy by the time the ship hits. He was a baby when they put him in on Krypton. He was a little boy who could stand up by the time he got to Earth. Jor-El was talking to him that whole time. You remember that? And then at 18 years of age, the Green Crystal called him. The Green Crystal built a fortress, and then he saw an AI of Jor-El. And then from 18 to 30, because Chris Reeve Superman reveals himself to the world at the age of 30. That's 12 years of training. And you can see it in the movie where they talked about eternal life. They talked about predestination. They talked about star systems and solar systems. They talked about different philosophies. They talked about chemistry and physics. That's why I love that film so, because Superman was not stupid. Remember, when Lex is showing his plan, Superman said, I don't need a geography lesson from you, Luthor. Do you remember that? Chris Reeve Superman was not stupid. He was a little too obsessed with Lois, but Superman's always been that. But my point is here, he was not stupid at all. This guy didn't understand how different countries work. This guy clearly didn't understand physics. This guy didn't understand anything, but Mr. Terrific did. He's not supposed to outshine Superman in his own movie. Next up, and this is something we talked about as well as soon as we saw this film. Next up, just right here. What do we see? We saw Supergirl's disrespect. Supergirl's disrespect. I mean, now somebody challenged me on this on Twitter this week. Now, and I had to, come back with some accuracy, and I sent a video link. Somebody said that Superman is not mentioned in the first Supergirl movie with Helen Slater in 1984. That's incorrect. He's in that movie. He's in there in the poster, and Supergirl clearly loves him and looks up to him. She reveals later, she said, he's my cousin. So she does acknowledge Kal-El in that movie, but she's talking to Lucy Lane in the scene. And Lucy Lane is like, my sister has an exclusive with that guy. Do you know him? And you ought to see the look on Kara's face. She just is in awe of her big cousin. And, she rubs the poster and all that. And she's just like, wow. This girl, Millie's version, is cursing him out and calling him a B. And thanks for watching my dog B. And she's drunk. And what? And he's just, taking it in stride. Oh, well, that's the way she is. What? No, Superman should have been like, don't talk to me like that. I just got through watching your dog, you somewhere getting lit. Don't talk to me like that. Just no. It's just ridiculous. Okay. Now we're going to look at what I talked about before, what they alluded to before, this right here, and that is the overseas reception. And that's because Superman is a primarily American character. So that's what I meant when I showed you Superman, Peace on Earth, and when I showed you Superman, the world, because he is primarily an American character. And I've seen a lot of people say he is forever linked with truth, justice, and the American way. So how does that come across overseas? Well, like I showed you with that other content, you can write Superman in such a way to make him a globally accepted figure. You just have to know how to write him that way. Because remember, people don't have to like you to respect you, and people don't have to agree with you to respect you either. And when people see you, doing good, even if they don't agree or whatever. But the box office reception here, remember I showed you the numbers, he did not do well overseas at all. Why do you think that was? Let me know in the comments. I'm interested to know what you think, because the overseas audience did not warm up to this version of Superman at all. Now, he did much better in Man of Steel, Henry Cavill's version with Snyder. But here, not at all. Eric, that's a great comment. I can't wait to pull that up. Okay, so I'm going to get there in a second because I'm just about done. So the overseas reception wasn't nearly what it should have been. So I want you to tell me in the comments why you think that was. I think is because there's no super in this man. I think because he's so weak. He's weak in every way a character could be weak. Okay, not just his powers, but his thinking, his reaction, his ability to reason, his ability to prepare, his knowledge. He's weak. But we saw him on the ground more often than not. Metamorpho, Ultraman. Just every time we saw this guy, he's getting his butt kicked. And I just don't think that overseas audiences warmed up to that at all, nor should they, because it was awful. Okay? So now I'm going to pull your comments on the screen before we close out, because I definitely want to review what you had to say, because y'all know I love comments. Butt kicking man, that's always what it's going to be for me. Butt kicked man, because that's all he did was get his butt kicked for the entire movie. So I don't know how he could be called anything else. I like Peacemaker. My point there is that Peacemaker didn't have anything to do with Superman. There's that one brief scene at the end, but I didn't watch Peacemaker because I wasn't interested, and also it was just, I didn't want to see all that. It was just really, X-rated, really, R-rated, X-rated. I don't want to see all that. Now, I was never interested in the character, but once I read the reviews, I certainly wasn't interested in seeing all that. And so I did watch the scene at the end. They changed the scene at the end from Snyderverse to Gunverse. So the original ending of it, maybe it was last season, they had Henry Cavill and Aquaman, Momoa and all that. They changed it to the Gunverse characters, but Peacemaker just isn't my cup of tea. So nothing wrong if you liked it. But my point there was that it wasn't a really heavy tie-in. Gunn's excuse for pulling this out of theaters was because of Peacemaker season 2, but it didn't really have anything to do with Superman. Wasn't it the only superhero movie of 2025? No. Fantastic Four came out, Thunderbolts came out, but they were both so unmemorable. That's why you didn't remember them. Neither one of those movies made really any kind of dent, which is a shame. And how the mighty have fallen. When Superman can't even break $700 million globally, and a Marvel movie, an MCU movie, isn't even remembered. Because Thunderbolts bombed and Fantastic Four first steps of bomb. Yeah. Superhero movies not being in theaters is an abomination. If Netflix gets Warner Brothers, that's where we're going. And if it becomes a trend, if they think there isn't any money to be made, because I'm going to tell you, they always learn the wrong lesson. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that they always learn the wrong lesson? Whenever we're in a situation, they always learn the wrong lesson. What's the right lesson? The right lesson is Top Gun Maverick. That you can take a property that's a sequel to a movie that came out in the 80s, and if you do it well, people will go to the theaters to see it. Top Gun Maverick is your proof that if you do the film well, even with an older character, even with an older franchise, if the movie's done well, people will go out to see it. Now, granted, Tom Cruise and Denzel Washington, Meryl Streep, Sigourney Weaver are probably our last real movie stars. The last real stars where you can put their name in the credits and people will see it just because they're in it. Tom Cruise, Meryl Streep, Sigourney Weaver, Denzel Washington are probably the last four. I think maybe we can put Morgan Freeman in that. We can probably put Samuel L. Jackson in that crowd too, but there's less than 10. Used to be Will Smith, but after all his personal troubles became known then. But there's less than 10 real movie stars left. And by real movie stars, what I mean, Scarlett Johansson too. Real movie stars are where once you see they're in the movie, you'll want to see it just because they're in it. So what's going to happen if Netflix get a hold of this is you can start saying goodbye to movie theaters because that's what's going to push for. As much as they say they won't, they will. This is going to be like Kathleen Kennedy when she was sitting there with George Lucas and said, the most important thing is to protect these characters. The most important thing is to preserve the vision of these characters as George created them and as he intended them to be. Do you remember her saying that on video? Remember that? What did she do once they got a hold of it? Killed Han, destroyed Luke and killed him, and made Leia useless. As soon as they got a hold of him, what did they do? We never got a shot of them together again, did we? That's what's going to happen if Netflix gets Warner Brothers. You write that down. If Netflix gets Warner Brothers, you can say goodbye to significant theatrical releases. You might have to say goodbye to movie theaters altogether. You'll see, mark my words and write it down. You'll see what's going, as much as they swear in committee, that's not what we're going to do. That's exactly what they're going to do if they let this merger go through. Write it down, okay? I think Superman has fallen below number 3 or will at least in the next decade, possibly, and I think a lot of it is this movie's fault. It would have been better if this movie had done better. Remember I told you wrong lesson. This movie had an opportunity to reestablish Superman in the minds of people as a global figure, because there have been so many iterations and versions of Superman that have been loved. Obviously, the Reeve version, but Henry Cavill's version, Dean Cain on TV. I'm not talking about whether or not you like him personally. I'm talking about how good the show was. Smallville has its own fan base. Smallville has a really huge fan base. A lot of people like that version. The animated series. I mean, so it's not that we haven't seen, and even people that didn't like Superman Returns, because that underperformed as well, recognize that Brandon Routh was not the problem. And he got a chance to reprise the character on the CW with their Crisis miniseries. So it's not that we haven't had other versions of Superman that have been loved and done well, but this movie, coming in the midst of all this talk of superhero fatigue, had to reestablish him as the hero he's supposed to be, and it failed. So if this prediction comes through, if Superman falls out of the top 3, I will blame this movie. I think this movie had a lot to do with that, honestly. Because Batman's still Batman. Batman's actually had a resurgence with Absolute Batman. Spider-Man is always Spider-Man. Spider-Man has always been one of the top three characters, and he's still the most merched, I think. But Batman, with Absolute Batman, has had even a comeback. Okay. I think most people under 30 would probably recognize Venom or Deadpool before Superman. I don't know how we'd measure that. Now, I've heard people say that to me before about how it's a generational thing. If we're talking about boomers, if we're talking about Gen Xers, if we're talking about millennials, talking about Gen Zers, Gen Alphas, we have to be specific about who we're talking about. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if we could get a big enough sample size in a poll to get a legitimate count on that. That people would recognize Venom or Deadpool before they recognize Superman. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying I don't know how we'd measure such a thing. It might be true. It might be true that anybody born this century, anybody 26 years of age and under, might recognize those other characters before Superman. I just personally don't see how, but I could be wrong. I just don't know how we'd measure it. That's wild. I think that comment was wild on the difference in the box office. Okay. Arox says, take your pick. Gunn either doesn't like Superman, doesn't understand the character, or tried to mold Superman into what he likes. In any of those options, the end result was bad. My response to that is all of the above. Check, check, check. Gunn doesn't like Superman because he said so. He said he relates more to Lex. Check. Gunn doesn't understand the character because he said so. He said he didn't want to write Superman because he didn't understand it. He didn't understand altruism and somebody that was doing good from a good point. Check. Try to mold Superman into what he likes, which was butt kick man. Check. So all of the above. I have said it from the jump. Y'all know I say it every time I talk about this topic. Gunn was the wrong man to put in charge of DC. If they were going to have him helm some DC properties, it should have been Justice League Dark. It should have been Etrigan. It should have been Metamorpho. It should have been Swamp Thing. It should have been Katana and the Outsiders. That is what James Gunn need to do. Characters like that, that's his jam. Not Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Okay? Imagine a Superman story where Superman appears in the Epstein files. And Clark Kent has to clear his name. That's a little extreme right there, Popcorn. But I know you're crazy. That's a little extreme. If they did a story like that, it would have to be a plant or a mistake. Lex would have to do something like that, use his influence to implicate something. But I mean, that couldn't possibly be true. How would everybody not know if Superman was on the island? But that's a little extreme. I would only accept a story like that if it was clear that Lex Luthor came up with something that dirty, because we ain't putting Superman's name in the same sentence with the Epstein files. Nope. Then it comes out Lex Luthor framed him. Yes, we can call it the Luthor files. I'll accept that. Mr. Terrific, who I like, was basically the main hero who did all the cool hero things in the movie. Perfectly said. That's absolutely 1000% right. All the hero stuff. Remember I told you how they always learn the wrong lesson? They think we want to see heroes broken. They think we want to see them crying and whining. They think we want to see them without their powers. They think we want to see them beaten at every turn. They think we want to see them dark, dirty, desperate, despair, and depressed. That's not how we want to see superheroes in superhero movies. We want to see them doing superhero things. How hard of a concept is that? But in this movie, it was all Mr. Terrific, not Kal-El of Krypton. I thought Philion was decent as Guy Gardner. He shouldn't have been Guy. Philion was born to be Hal Jordan, him or Tom Cruise. I will live on that hill. I know don't nobody like Tom Cruise as hell, but me, I don't care. Cruise would have killed that. Hot Girl, Metamorpho was a convenient plot device, yes. Lois Lane is a natural pilot of ship she's never been in, that's right. Because Girl Boss, I do think Brosnahan had the look and the feel of Lois's character right. So I did not feel like she was out of character for Lois Lane at any point in the movie. But the movie should have been about Superman. Now, I said this recently on Twitter. I'm going to repeat it here. The reason I like Superman the movie so much is because it was actually about the hero. I want you to think about that. Superman the movie was not about Superman and Lex. It was about Superman. And Lex was a part of the movie. Butt Kick Man was about Superman and Lex. Smallville was about Superman and Lex and Lana. You understand? The Killing Joke was about Batman and the Joker. The Dark Knight was about the Joker, guest starring Batman. Superman the movie and Batman Begins were actually about the characters. That's why I don't like them. Following what I'm saying? Donner film was superior to Butt Kick Man despite special effects of the time. That's right. So much better written. Marlon Brando was epic. All that I agree with. But even the special effects were good because they weren't CGI. Christopher Reeve was really on those wires. And even the helicopter scene, that was really him on the wires in the helicopter. And Donner said he realized that was a mistake. They shouldn't have done that, but they did. They made us believe a man could fly. So even though that Man of Steel sequence, first flight in Man of Steel, was really, really good, the CGI mess now takes you out of it because your brain knows it's not real. That stuff with Reeve on the wires was real. Okay. I love this comment right here. This comment right here. Maybe I'm an old fuddy-duddy, but isn't Superman and Supergirl, so aren't they supposed to be inspiring? Hopeful? How do we get that from a Valley Girl, Supergirl, and Butt Kick Man? Absolutely right. And the answer to your question is you are absolutely right in that statement. I could not possibly agree more. That no matter what you think of Superman, what he has come to represent in the minds of normies and comic readers alike is inspiration, is not becoming a tyrant even with all that power, about always trying to be the best person he can be in any situation. That is Superman. And Supergirl trying to live up to that example. She doesn't feel the same way he does. And once they retconned her, remember, original Kara is not retcon Kara. They retcon Kara to be older than him. They retcon Kara for her to have being sent to Earth to watch over her baby cousin. Then her ship got stuck. Then Superman got here first and grew up, and she got here later. So she was younger, and she's stronger than him. All that's a retcon. That was not original recipe Kara. She always looked up to him, and she felt bad when she didn't live up to his example. But they always learned the wrong lesson. So out of all the Supergirl content to pick from, they picked Tom King's Man of Tomorrow. And then they picked the opening scene where Kara has gone to a planet under a red sun to get towed up. So the first time we see her in this movie is Kara lit, Kara drunk. Always remember, folks, they always learn the wrong lesson. You are not an old fuddy-duddy. That expectation is spot on. They don't understand Superman. They don't like Superman or Kara. Which is why the first time you show us Kara, she drunk out of her mind, really? Interesting about the Superman film, I've had 3 comic book shop owners tell me the college age and younger crowd loved the film, and they came in asking for Superman comics. I guess that's a positive. I think that's cool. I think, now if we're going to get into the generational thing, I think it's a reflection of the heroes they've seen. Because starting with Smallville, Starting with Smallville and going through all the CW stuff, I want you to remember that all those heroes were emasculated and cut and broken. And we had a nickname for Grant Gustin's Barry Allen, Cryberry, because he cried in every episode. And Barry Allen has never needed a posse. He's never needed a man in a chair. That was an invention of the CW. Neither has Oliver Queen. That was an invention of the CW. By the end of Arrow, Oliver had so many characters. And by the end of The Flash, Barry, sure enough, had so many characters until Barry Allen was only appearing at the beginning and at the ending of his own show. You remember that? And remember, they were cut. Remember that? They had all kinds of other dudes sleep with their girlfriend. Remember that Green Arrow slept with Lois, and maybe Lois hooked up with Aquaman. And remember on Smallville? And remember Lana slept with Lex and Bizarro on Smallville? And remember Felicity slept with, I think it was Ray Palmer or somebody else. And so all they've seen, if they were born this century, and those are the heroes they grew up on, all they've seen is broken men, crying men, cuckolded men, weak men, not alpha males, not leaders, not men. In the comics, Barry Allen made his own costume. In the comics, Barry Allen was inspired by Jay Garrick, which is why he called himself the Flash. And Barry Allen studied the science of speed and came up with his Flash facts. He did all that by himself. That's not Ezra Miller Barry Allen, and that's not Grant Gustin's Barry Allen. So the younger crowd, those would be the only versions that they know. That's why they think that, in my opinion. That's all they would have seen in their lifetime is their male heroes being more beta and the girl boss kind of thing. So that's why I would think they had that reaction. I could be wrong, just my perspective. He was not an amazing inspiration. His actions did not really touch the heart. That's right. I don't recall if we saw him helping overseas people, too many characters to spend time connecting to us, no tear jerks. That's right. But what did we see? We saw him saving a squirrel. Nah. Had to take time out. I know he saved that little girl. I know we got in front of that little girl. That's the shot they showed in the trailers. And I know they showed him, but we saw him saving a squirrel. But in that one scene, he fell down, he was broken, and that one India dude had to pick him up because that's what Gunn thinks of Superman, that we have to help him, we have to lift him up when he gets knocked out the sky. I hate this movie with a passion, y'all. Remember Superman Return, Lois finds out her kid might be Superman's, but she doesn't remember sleeping with him? Yes. That is a direct result of Superman Returns not deciding what it wanted to be. Superman Returns couldn't decide if it was a sequel, a reboot, or a remake of the Donner films. So Superman Returns took it from Superman 1 and 2, ignored Superman 3 and Superman 4, wisely so. But Singer couldn't decide if Superman Returns was a remake of the first movie, if it was a sequel to the first movie, or if it was a reboot of the franchise. So Superman Returns tried to be all three and failed at all three. In Superman 2, remember that when Superman was depowered, he slept with Lois. Remember, they were on the silver hammock in the fortress. Then he gets repowered up and then basically says he can't be with her. So he gives her the forget-o kiss. He kisses her and she conveniently only forgets her relationship with him. Although I guess she forgot Zod and them because she said what's happening in the world. So that too, but that's still selective memory erasure. But anyway, so by the time we get to Superman Returns, Kate Bosworth's Lois is Margot Kidder's Lois. Brandon Routh's Superman is Chris Reeve's Superman. So that's why she didn't remember. But that still would have to be a trip because that means she would have to wake up one day and realize she was pregnant. She'd have to say, how? What if she didn't have a boyfriend at the time? She would have to wake up one day and take a pregnancy test and say, I'm pregnant? How? Unless she had a boyfriend at the time. I think she went off and got with James Marsden's character, Richard White. I think she went off and got with him quickly after she found out she was pregnant to make him think the baby was his. I really do. I really do. That once she found out she was pregnant, I think she hurried up and got with him so that when the baby was born, he would think, but because when little kid Superman manifested his powers, remember that Lois was just as surprised as the thugs were. So that's why that was such a mess in Superman Returns. The first response should have been, "When'd you do roofing me?" Yeah, true, true, true. Sad part is that the casting of Superman, Lois, Jimmy, and Lex were spot on. Yes. When I first saw Corn Sweat in Twisters, I thought, man, he'll make a great Superman. That was my first immediate reaction. When I first saw him out of the context of this movie, I was like, wow, this is going to be great. Because I really bought him. I really thought he had aura in Twisters, and I really thought he was going to make a great Superman. And then I actually see him in the film, and I'm like, ugh. But yeah, Corn Sweat casting, Brosnahan, Jimmy, and Lex. See, this movie had the potential, just in terms of the casting, to do really, really well. Weren't the Man of Steel numbers disappointing too at the time, though? Isn't that why the studio rebooted again? Yes, because they learned the wrong lesson because they couldn't get it right. Because they keep putting the wrong director in charge of Superman. We know that Snyderverse spawned kind of like its own acolytes, and people love him and love his whole universe with this obsession that I can't clock. I can't clock the obsession that people have with Snyder and his universe. I don't get it. I've never gotten it. But whatever. But the reason that they rebooted is because all of it was the wrong direction. In Man of Steel, he's dark, Moby, broody, and in Man of Steel, Superman had to be forced out of hiding. He was called out by Zod. He was helping people, but he had to be called out by Zod. And the government didn't trust him, and Martian Manhunter didn't trust him, and he wasn't inspirational, and he broke necks, and blah, blah, blah. And then Warner Brothers said, it's not that the movie didn't make money, but maybe it didn't make a lot of money. They wanted us to love it. So once again, it wasn't the hit that they wanted. So what did they do? Same thing they always do. Just add Batman. If you think you're in trouble, just add Batmans. And then we got Superman versus Batman, which was terrible. Then they shoehorned Wonder Woman in that movie and messed up Doomsday and Lex. Don't get me started. Okay? But that was a disappointment at the time for that. What did you prefer, Smallville or 2025 Superman? Neither. Can't stand neither of them. As fun as the Mr. Terrific action scene was, it was literally just a rehash. Beyonder's escape scene, yes. Because we know that Gunn only makes one movie, Guardians. We know that. I don't even understand how that can be argued anymore. Between Creature Commandos and the Suicide Squad, and he only makes one movie. How can that be argued at this point? I don't understand it. Streaming superhero movies will kill the genre completely. It's on life support now, but that would be effectively pulling the plug. That's what's coming if Netflix buys Warner Brothers. That's what's coming. Write it down. That's what's coming. Agree, popcorn superhero movies are made for the big screen. Sadly, yes, I still have nightmares about the day Lucas sold. Yes, because she sat up there with a straight face and spouted all that rhetoric. What did she do? What did she do when she got their hands on the property? That's what Netflix is going to do. I think it'd have to be a man on the street poll. Maybe. So, yeah, so that's what I wanted to talk about today, was why Butt Kick Man failed, because we got numbers in. We got that admission by Ted Sarandos, and we got Netflix vying to buy Warner Brothers. So honestly, folks, we might have to say goodbye to superhero movies on the big screen. I don't want to. You don't want to. We might have to. What it would take to reboot this genre is another The Dark Knight. Marvel thinks that Doomsday is going to be that, but it won't. Doomsday is going to be what it already is. You can already smell it a mile away. Nothing but nostalgia bait and endless cameos. That's not a story. Same with Secret Wars. Although at this point, I don't think Secret Wars is going to do well at all because I think Doomsday is going to be painfully disappointing. So Marvel thinks that that's what Avengers Doomsday is going to be, but no, it won't. No, it won't. To reboot the superhero genre on the big screen, we need another The Dark Knight. Or we need another Avengers, but we really need something more like The Dark Knight that's loved and rewatched by normies. That's what we need. And they keep learning the wrong lesson. Dark, despair, dystopian, depressed. That's not what we want to see in superhero fare. So Marvel has one last shot with X-Men. Avengers Doomsday is not going to do it. Secret Wars is not going to do it. Wonder Man, not going to do it. Vision Quest, not going to do it. Not going to do it. Bringing Kamala Khan back is not going to do it. Is not going to do it. If it's going to be done, it's going to be with the X-Men. The X-Men is the only upcoming superhero movie that has the potential to put superhero movies back on the map because the X-Men are loved by comic people and normies alike. We need another The Dark Knight. That's the only way. Netflix is not going to do that. You think Netflix is going to do that? They're not going to do that. Don't even get your hopes up. Okay? That's the only franchise, the X-Men, which is still several years away, that has a shot. By then, I don't know how many people are going to care. But anyway, that's it for me today. So let me repeat what I said at the top of the video because I really need you guys to tell me. Tell me in the comments or tell me on Twitter or email me. Let me know. But I have to get my views up if I'm going to continue to do my live streams because my views and my followers are not what they need to be. And I really, really, really need to get my live streams up if I'm going to continue to do this. So I need you guys to tell me what kind of content you want to see from me. Do you prefer live streaming? Do you prefer long form videos versus short form videos? I get more views on my short form videos on my shorts. And so do you prefer those? Do you prefer long form videos? Panel videos? Do you like those? Any topics you want me to cover that I'm not covering? Also, do I need to change my broadcast time? I realize coming on at 10 a.m. on a Friday morning may not be the best time for a lot of people. So I need you to talk to me because if I'm going to continue to do this, I have to grow my channel. I got to get my views up to where they need to be, and they're not nearly where they need to be. Okay? So I'm going to need some feedback from you guys to let me know. So please answer those questions for me. I'm also going to put up a post on my YouTube channel so you can answer me there. So you can put in the comments under this video. You can email me. You can talk to me on Twitter. You can put the comments underneath the post. But I need to know what kind of content do you want to see from me? Long form versus short form videos. Do you want to see me doing more panels? Are there any topics you want me to cover that I'm not covering? Do I need to change my broadcast time for live streaming? Is there a better time we can get more eyes on it? So I need you guys to talk back to me and let me know. Because if I'm going to continue to do this, I have to get my views up. Okay? All right, that's it for me today. Thank you so much to those of you that joined me live. Thank you so much for your comments. You know I love them. And Looking forward to hearing your feedback. So I will see you same time next week, Friday 10 a.m. Central Standard Time for our next weekly live comics chat. Enjoy the Super Bowl this weekend, those of you that are going to watch. DT2 Comics Chat out.